Forensic love. I will be unearthed. Another nameless coffin in an overcrowded world in 2098. And they will jettison me 92,827,000 miles beneath the sun onto the eternal revolving wheel. Bin of old bones that once in vacuum will never die, but spin in contrapuntal harmony with the moon. Dark sister, may she last, watching as I watch, whatever earth with each unfutile spring may bring again. Great gray heron rising from pure blue of water out over mist and reeds, or red-winged blackbird, first seed and thorn, or Copernicus to tell us he was wrong, that the human heart and not the sun marks the center, the doorway. Or maybe this end will not be the end, but nicked by a meteor, thrown by its wake, this old jangle and clank of bones with their once endless code of living cells of experience will, as a wolf howl or a vowel will, without the consonant of things, drift toward the vast outer unknown. Unlured by Saturn, uninjured by the sun, able to miss each wandering asteroid, as ancestors, sister and brother to my Uncle Joe Vazzetti, long may his gold tooth gleam, did not. For in a moment of singing, they failed to miss and travel on their way a careening drunk one night on a mountainside road in Italy. And before bursting into smithereens, they went screaming into flames. But I will last until I last, bump up and nuzzle the nose of another someone who, in whatever form, will pluck me from the deep. Mystery or fraud? I will be as Lucy, or from Olduvai Gorge, Piltdown Man, Mask of Agamemnon, or whatever hunkered unknown daubed a bison's soul in primordial light of Lascaux. Here, the knee bone slipped the femur, the tibia twisted away, the shin scraped, the toe cracked. But not the how or why, not the story, not the song, not that I was drunk and spinning on one leg, whirling as if a stick of fire above my head, a cherry red, feedback engorged, 8-stringed electric bass guitar that yowled and screeched, shrieked to shrieking cats in heat or wild pigs at Hadrian's Wall when I tripped and fell and broke my damn knee. So perhaps those who discover me will come to know what fragrance lies unbloomed, what Bushman chant or Igbo tongue, what vanished larynx of Sioux, what grief Enkidu under earth, Upanishad or Andromachy at the wall, Odysseus before the blood, what Gullah, Geechee, a Southside jive, what palaver we as humans are that lingers in these bones. Cool. I love, that was a fun one. For me anyway.
Nice. That's terrific. This is welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Poets in Montana. You just heard Dave Caserio reading Forensic what?
Love. Forensic Love.
Love, yeah. And that's the first poem in this Vanishing, isn't it?
It is, as a matter of fact, yes.
Yeah, and this is, if you can see that, this is the copy of Dave's book. It's probably backwards, isn't it? We're on Zoom, so
that's okay.
This Vanishing, and that's a couple years ago, Dave. 3 years, or
yeah, it's been a while now. No, 2014 is when it came out, and even though it feels just like yesterday,
just prior to before the world went upside down, right?
Well, I know it. And it is. It's been what, 2.5 years now. The world went, kind of nuts.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's one way. There's several perspectives on when the world went nuts, but
that's true. Yeah.
Which, of course, I think a lot of the poems in this Vanishing seem to cover.
that is true. And the funny part was that as we end things today, I've got a newer poem that kind of, the last poem was called This Vanishing, and it's actually kind of hopeful about that idea. Then I wrote that poem back in the late 90s, and and in the 20 years, intervening 20 years, I'm a little more pessimistic, and I'll read that poem towards the end so you get an idea of where, oh, he was here. Oh God, no, he's here. Oh, that's it. We're doomed. So.
Well, I was looking forward to this session just to hear you read your poems, and of course that's kind of what this is all about, is this idea of archiving the verbal, the oral aspect of this art form. And you are probably you're a master at it, and I wondered if do you have a dramatic background, stage background?
Yeah, no, as a matter of fact, that's the funny part. The joke is that, back when I was in my early 20s and I was in Escondido, California, going to, I decided to take some classes at the community college. And so I wanted to learn how to read poetry better, because I had, any practice that I had was by listening to people like James Mason, the actor, and all those British people trying to read poetry. And I'd be like, and people be snoring in the back because the poetry sucked, for one, that I wrote, but also, the way I read it. And so I took theater, to try to learn how to, what's it like to be on stage? Because I'm an introvert, I don't, but yet you put me on stage and I change.
Yeah.
And so I went, took some theater classes, and conversely, I got into mime. So it was like, I'm not going to talk, get rid of my poetry, and I did that for a living for gosh, 5 or 6 years, and really enjoyed it. And I worked with, and I mixed media. I worked with dancers and and musicians within the context of the mime performances, but as a poet, you're learning stuff all the time, right? So what you learn about silence, what you learn about perhaps dramatic technique that might fit into poetry. I mean, Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy, Buster Keaton. I mean, geez, all that stuff. You go back even to people like besides Marceau, but you go back to some of the French phenomenalists. I can't remember what they're called now, but they're almost like Perrault, sort of back to Commedia dell'arte.
Mm-hmm.
So.
The power of the unsaid.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
I think Tammy Holland here in Montana is just so powerful with, she says things very clearly, but it's what's unsaid in those poems too. That's just, damn, I wish I could have done that, but I can't. So. Yeah.
That quiet. Well, so I was curious, in your book, which I just read again the other night, in this Vanishing, it's got very particular sections to it, of material in it.
Yeah.
And in that first section, as a reader, we come away from that section as, this is the voice of someone giving you their personal narrative on their life, right? And so how much of that section does come out of personal life, and how much just, is the poet's license to create?
In some ways, I think it's both, right? In the sense that that most of the stuff was true as far as I know.
Right.
But then, of course, memory and how you perceive as a child does change. One of the classic things is that I had started this poem and I never really finished it, but waking up as a child and hearing my mother just cry out, in ways that I thought, and I thought my father was, doing that to her again, right? As I got older, I thought, well, maybe they were having sex. It's disappeared that way, right? Because it was almost the same kind of thing, which as a kid, I had no clue what that was, right? I was just a little kid crying for my mom,
Right.
So I've tried to be as honest as I can in these and not, hold back, because this idea, well, here, I'll read this poem that'll kind of give you my philosophy about that.
Cool.
And I'll do 2 poems, but I'll do this first one here. And this is a newer one, and it's written in response to a good friend of mine whose first book of poetry is called Odd Boy. And he had a difficult home life, and I won't tell you who it is. It's not that it matters. His book is out and everything.
Right.
And so his home life was, you know, I mean, it's lucky he survived. You know, with two parents are trying to do you in, you know, it's not good.
Right.
So anyway, so it's so the odd boy, right? To the odd boy on reading your first book of poetry. Well, some of us can't survive our fathers, and some fathers can't survive their children. We can count the mothers in there too. It's a brutal thing, this business of procreation, but that's the way it is. We go on with what has been done to us, what we do to ourselves, to others, to make the life that might be ours, and learn how to love the world, despite itself, because of itself. And that's the beginning of what poetry is. And you have found it and written it, one of the kindest men I know. Odd child who survived to sing even as he weeps, poet who is my friend, and I am blessed to say so.
Beautiful.
You know,
That's nice.
And not everyone might agree with that's what poetry is, but for me, and I think in many ways it is. You know.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So
that voice to for the human being who doesn't know anything and is trapped in this experience and deals with what happens. That's a great that's a great definition of poetry, I'd say.
Yeah, and I'm not one for, you know, making definitions that you have to fit things in. Poetry just goes and dispels any of those notions.
It can be whatever you want it to be, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know.
Yeah.
So that kind of.
Just out of curiosity, where did you come from before you landed in Billings, Montana?
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Chicago on the South Side, and then up until probably about 1968, family moved out. Just, you know, my first year of half of my first year of high school, and if you remember that time and so forth, you know, it was the time of just a lot of different upheaval, obviously, but also on racial bounds. You know, it was the old thing of white people don't want to live with black people, which was stupid to me as a kid and stupid to me now. And not all white people, obviously, you know. And so they moved to the suburbs from the South Side, you know. And so I grew up there, and I went to school on what is now it's pretty much to me still part of the city, but it's not, a little just a suburb on the edge of Chicago. And then, you know, by the time I got to be 19, I left Chicago. You know, I've always wanted to travel. And so I just, you know, I had done a lot of, you know, back and forth road trips, you know. I mean, we used to like roll 60 joints, you know, and jump in the car, and you know, we got the weekend off from the mills, right? We're going to stop working. We're going to leave on Friday, you know, after the 4 to 12, and we're going to drive all night. We can probably get to Denver by, you know, doing 55 miles an hour, you know. And the three of us in the back of a little Pinto, right? You know. And so, but then I eventually went out to California, and kind of I went out, you know, well, that's a long story, and we'll get caught up in that. But let's just say I joined a cult. No. I mean, so at the time, it was part of my you know my breakthroughs in my mind. But you know, looking back on, well, kind of a cult.
Yeah. Well, that's one of those youthful experiences.
Yeah. You know,
how about when did you first really sort of start, you know, taking poetry seriously?
Oh, seriously? You know, I mean, I always thought I was serious, you know, from the moment I started. But I think I was 30 when I wrote the first poem, where I went, I think this is a real poem. I mean, I could feel it in my hands, right? And you know, I mean, you know, and it just was like, yeah, this is real. I don't think anybody can take it away from me. And I remember when I finally got to graduate school and brought it into the workshop, you know, at NYU, and Cannell goes, and he said he liked it, but he goes, it wobbles, you know. And you know, like maybe he meant the diction and the syntax. I don't really know, because he didn't explain that. But it was a real poem. He says kind of like a colt. It's still a horse, you know. It's wobbles, but it's a real horse. It's not a kangaroo when you've been trying to make a horse, you know. And so, but I knew it. I could feel it. And then of course, you know, whatever feedback and so I think, you know, so at that point, and just a little prior to that, because I went to Goddard, you know, undergraduate, when I was like 27. And that was a turning point in my life too. And so, and that's where I kind of started to be serious about it. Tom Absher was the poet there. So, and he gave good advice. He said, look at, you've made this declaration that you're a poet, now, even though you've been that for a long time. He said, but, you're going to betray it at different times. You're going to forget. He said, but that's okay. You'll come back to it. It's been good advice.
So so you said when you said Canal, you meant Galway Canal?
Galway Canal at NYU. Yeah, I was lucky to get in there. And
what year was that? I mean,
that
how
was
old were you?
85 to 87. I was there in that program.
Okay.
And that was a great time to be in New York. It was just, I got into New York in 83, mm-hmm. And 83 to 93, and I loved being there. I wouldn't want to go back and live in New York. And then I moved to Seattle and stayed in Seattle from 93 until 2003, and I kind of got involved with a lot of performance poetry in Seattle.
Okay.
And then in 2003, I came out to Montana, and I've been living in Billings ever since July 7th of 2003.
Cool. Well, you have gotten around. Well, one of the things that you notice immediately, even from reading something like this Vanishing, it's obvious to me that this man is very much an oral poet. And then when I read your bio, of course, in the back, and I knew this from having spoken to you before, but that you were definitely a part of the sort of the slam poetry scene, the oral, the spoken word type poetry. And because there's so much music and these sort of, all those ways that you can memorize a poem and create this sort of world that swirls with language. You do that so exceptionally well. Do you want to give us something like that? Do you want to read one of those, or?
Well, yeah, I will. I'll read you.
Let me interrupt you again.
No, please interrupt. That's the whole fun about this. Like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. No, but the thing is, I never ever wrote for slam, right? I wrote the poems I was going to write anyway, and then. I read, people hear slam poetry and they get a certain idea, but at the Seattle Slam, it was really interesting because, one of the cool things I did is I love Anglo-Saxon, Beowulf and all that kind of stuff. And I took a class at NYU with Jess Besant. Well, he was supposed to teach, but he didn't. And so while I'm not very good at translation, I really love the sound of Anglo-Saxon. And so I would do things like, well, I'm going to memorize sections of Beowulf and perform them, in Anglo-Saxon. You won't understand a word of it, but you'll see Grendel rip off or get his arm ripped off, that type of thing, right? And so I would take stuff like that into it, So I just saw it as, like you said, oral poetry. I said, well, this is, once a week, we for long stretches, we would get 100 to 125 people in there drinking and wanting to hear poetry, and we had a house band and the whole type of thing like that. So I thought, well, this is a great audience. If I could put something in a magazine and maybe 10 people might read it, but I can go out and try poems and,
right.
and bring different things in to it,
Right.
So it's like, I don't mean to disavow slam poetry. It's just that I don't really like labels, like calling me an academic poet because I bring in, somebody else that I've read, or it sounds like it,
Right.
Well, yeah. But then, if you, in a slam, you only got 3 minutes, right? So I don't do a lot of short poems for the most part.
Right.
So this poem, let's see if I can remember it. I'll give it to you. And my father used to stay up nights after the midnight shift in the mills, while we 3 kids half slept, waiting for his sweaty, oil-soaked scent. Our mother not knowing which man would come home, or if he would come home, but drunk or sober, beer in hand, silhouette at the door, he'd look in on us, our eyeballs fluttering under skimpy lids like heartbeats, and he'd count 1, 2, 3, until somewhere in the night, a strange music matching a howl, a hunkering down, a great surging out of gut vowels would erupt. And I would slip from bed into the dark stream of the hallway, the creak of wood he could not hear. And each time I'd see where my father sat, legs spread, white as marble, old as Heraclitus, skinny and hairy in his boxer shorts, the quiet fur of his belly hanging over, and a clarinet, sometimes a saxophone, wailing, blowing that root reed till the reed cried, Egyptian mama, you make me bleed, wailing the Harlem Shuffle, Charlie Bird, somebody, anybody. And all the pain, his father who tied him, beat him, locked him for days in the attic closet, once with a sickle, splitting him from forearm to wrist. No future, the mills, the daughter he'd take to bed and the wife he beat senseless, or sons already turned away that would never come back. Maybe, just maybe, finding its way out.
Wow. Yeah. Terrific, man. That's and I remember just reading that too from the first section of this Vanishing. That's a terrific poem. And of course, upon reading it, of course, I thought to myself, it's no wonder that I fell in love with your work. I mean, we have a whole hell of a lot in common, and in a way, kind of the way we express it is very similar too. I mean, in terms of the music and then just sort of the graphic sort of reality, I think, that comes into your work I love it, Yeah.
Well, it's funny because I thought about painters like, I like Kandinsky and those guys a lot, or of course, Van Gogh. Well, I'm going to say Van Gogh. Some for Chicago. We can say it any goddamn different way we want.
Exactly.
Plus, we can vote 5 times legally. Again, pizza war, I'll take you out back. So. And no, sorry, that's just, I won't name names, but some friends of ours who are writers here in Billings, we can have a pizza war. When you hear this, you'll know who it is, who I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, you might have met them. So, and no, sorry. But so I'll just stick in I'll just read a couple more on this sort of blue collar kind of theme, And the other things, I do have a lot of poems in my mother's voice and so forth and everything. And I don't want to overread, but maybe these two, and then there's a couple more just to kind of end things, or when I don't know how we're doing for time. So
we got time. I don't know where. And the other thing too is we can always edit this thing if we need to.
Okay.
But we won't need to. I'm sure that we're doing just fine.
Okay, cool. Well, so this idea, I just this is called 3 Fragments of Father's Day. In half arc from the deep, at the clap whip snap of flagpole under lamplight, he jerks from a junk water sleep of tobacco spit and diesel, flop of uncertain sinew and bone, stunned into air with a pig-throated snork, to twist in bare light and binding sheet, his dazed mutter of eyes. For his fires have gone up and out, in tracer flit and red filament, in iron ore and powdered lead, into the long dying sulfur of day and night, as monoxide and cyanide into the Wabash and Fox, into the Allegheny and Tar, Lakes Huron and Erie, into the ruptured liver of Pike, into smelter and pit, into acid and rain. For 37 years, he has willed himself from bed, at the prod of the wife, under the yoke of children, driven over the flat swill of river, and surrendered in what seemed the hour of the grave, to walk into slag heap and fire, the laminated green ID flapping at his shirt, the clear royal RC of his signature on the ledger bar, R. Caserio, hair brown, eyes brown, born in 32, standing at 5'8", weight 160 pounds.
Wow. I wasn't sure if you were done there.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
I was mesmerized in that painting. You just talked about paintings, and that was a very visual little video that I just went through here. Yeah. You had another one too, right?
Yeah, and so this one's a little longer, but it's kind of goes back to being a kid, right? Where you asked about when I became a serious poet or whatever, serious. So I'll start making jokes about that are a bit obscene. But but remember when you were little in elementary school, and maybe they still do it, but we had show and tell, right? So you'd bring something in. Look, I got a stuffed dog. Okay, great. And here's my pet rat. He's been dead for a year. But I still carry him. That kind of stuff. Kids are bringing weird things.
Yeah.
But I loved people like Tennessee Ernie Ford, right? And I like Mom's Mabley and all that stuff you'd see on TV back then, because I know some of the poems that you've written about that. About that time period. How TV taught us so much, or
Right.
and again, I always thought that I could sing, and I thought that I could sing more specifically, just like Tennessee Ernie Ford, right? And so that I would, and I had his voice, right? And so in second grade, I brought in the record player, or they had the record player, and I brought in the old 45, right, and of 16 tons, that song, and that song is really about real stuff, right? So anyway, so this poem is called 16 tons, and if you know the song, you can snap along with it, right? Type of thing. So 16 tons. Second grade show and tell, and I'm full out singing to the 45. 16 tons, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Sure and damn happy that Tennessee Ernie Ford and I were cats of the same litter. What he was singing, I was singing, with all the Broadway, Grand Ole Opry, and Auntie Mame in me. By swinging arms and marching step, bundled in Dad's old blue suit coat, a grid of red plaid shirt, a wisp of dapper thin pin tie, I threw it down. From the nickel-tip clip of a finger snap to the sly look-away look to the dazzling down-home grin, graced by the elegant homemade mustache my mother penciled in. Certain at 7, I was blessed of those deep-throated chops that would let come forth a spine-rattling bass baritone vibrato to cleft mortar and brick, as though the Lord were singing in the stones and throbbing the ancient walls of Bennett Elementary. Erasers would startle and clap, blackboards would write in tongues, and the white chalk leap up like small fishes. And from holy layers of coal-suited dinge, the solace of angels would gleam down through panes of glass to join in spiritual humming, to unshackle the bodies of classmates and crack them upright in miraculous wonder, out of chair prison, out of wooden desk, and we would shout, "Oh Lord Almighty," we would shout our quivering alleluia. And my teacher would love me. "St. Peter, don't call me, 'cause I can't go." But what did I know? All shave-cut and cowlick, gap-tooth and freckle, with the knobby ears of endless English, Irish, Welsh, Manx, Scottish ancestors sprouting from my head like a double-handled teacup. What did I know of canebrakes and old mama lions? What did I know of Telluride and Ludlow, of Leadville and Cripple Creek, of children same as me, of minors, of paupers, of daughters too, of orphans made to hew, to haul, 12 hours, 18 hours, of days, of months, of lives, of generations passing and going under into shaft and timber, into trench and lamplight? What did I know of black damps and white, of black lung and the blue violet, that would herald rivers of fire, or trappers and squibs and sprags, or rats feeding on the gob, where crumbs fell and men shit and took their morning tea and listened to the weight of a half-mile of earth above speak in coal seam and pillar? What did I know of firings and blacklistings, of scabs and strike breakers, of union busters, of state militia undisciplined and in cahoots with pit bosses, hired thugs, barrel house gunmen, Pinkertons, and spies? What did I know of those who went under, as did the soldiers of Verdun or Wipers, to fight and die and dig for the same reasons by the same bosses, for the same money that declared there's no constitution here, only the end of a gun, only bayonets and barbed wire, internment and deportation, as they huddle into pits scraped deeper into dirt, covered only by scorched canvas, flapped and riddled by machine gun and rifle, to run into open prairie, to give birth or starve or lie mingled as corpse among burnt wagons and spent rounds and the wind-clacked litter of shattered, empty bottles of whiskey. What did I know? But I knew that Tennessee Ernie Ford's voice was my voice. The truth of the song was the truth. and it dartled my skin, the way a dragonfly, the way a dragonfly skips across a skim of water, sounding the deep until the deep rose up. A cold blue fire uncoiled in the well of my spine, shivered in the plum of my scrotum, spun in tendrils down my legs, twin curlicues of blue serpent fire rising through me as I threw myself out in squawk and fractured squeak, calling out and calling song, out to something I could not yet see, out to the man I wanted to be, out of this singing inside of me. St. Peter, don't call me because I can't go. What did I know? But no. Cool.
Wow. Phenomenal, man. That's a terrific poem.
So it's just kind of fun to, and that one is, I mean, true and not true at the same time, right? It's just part of it. I don't remember really what I was like. I'm kind of sort of remember that,
And so much of it is sound driven too. That it's just that's just a wonderful experience, but chock full of all the detail from that time and that experience too, and the social situation around you.
Yeah,
you're sold to the company store.
I'll tell you, I mean. Well, I mean, you work with young kids. It's like we're sold stuff every damn moment of our lives. We buy into these narratives of who we should be, what we should do, and what we should get, and what's success, and what matters. And
Right.
and, I mean, Lowell Yeager does some great stuff with that, where he talks about Whitman's poem "The Spider," about the soul, and he reminds the kids that what's important is that thing inside, whatever it is for you. I mean, we'll call it religion, philosophy, but pay attention to that. And poetry is supposed to do that for us, slow us down and go, let's hear what's there, not just shout out, slogans or something, or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So yeah, so that's, I guess if I believe anything, I believe that too.
Well, it is I think it's a sacred sort of thing when people do that. And so because of that, there is this comparison, I think, to poetry and religion or prayer, because it is this sort of invoking. You're trying to, connect with something larger than yourself, and it's important. Whatever this is trying inside of you that wants to get out, it's important.
Yeah.
You find these little different ways to get at it. One of the things that blows me away, and it's a question that obviously needs to be asked for our readers too, because they're sitting at home right now going, Jesus Christ, does he memorize everything he's ever written?
No.
These are chocked full long poems that aren't necessarily that exact metronome, rhythm, and rhyme that makes them a little bit easier to memorize. These are long, big, chock full poems.
Well, a lot of those, what'll happen is just that I'll, especially in performance, because I work a lot with musicians, right?
Right.
I'm fortunate to work with, here in Billings with Parker Brown. There's so many other Parker Brown and Alex Nallman, and I mean, there's some, and Trevor Krieger, there's some great musicians here in town where we do a lot of poetry, shows, because you can actually make money. People will come out, drink beer, listen to music and poetry, working with Mark Bodine, up in Livingston, and we had Billy Conway, which I'm sad that he's no longer with us, and Parker came and played, bass, and geez, it's fun, and so what I'll do is I'll have the poems out, and so it allows you a little bit, they're printed on the page, right, but then you'll change it based on the music. You might, it just changes it completely. So some of those longer ones I don't try just to do by memory, though. I have that long one about the First World War and so forth that I've memorized. I haven't got it in memory now, but a lot of the long ones I'll just have out like a score so I can see it. And so, but like you said, poetry is an oral tradition. We want to hear it out loud, but it also has to kind of work on the page too. If it doesn't work on the page, well,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and part of the part of the way it works on the page, influences the way it's presented too. If you're a good reader like yourself, it's an art form that's got two sort of branches to it, I'd say. I mean, mainly you've got that, or as Zarzisky says, the stage and the page, right? You know, I mean that kind of aspect to it. So is there, you know, you mentioned the whole musical thing. Is there something from, I mean, it sure wouldn't have the same impact without the musicians, of course, because of that, because of the music, because of those pauses, because of the drama of that situation, the music being there. Is there something from that realm that you want to share? Or
well, yeah, but it's a pretty long poem. But it's the thing is that even the poem I just read, 16 Tons, you know, we do the same thing because that, you know, that you've got the built-in song, you know, so that starts it off, but then they can just riff and, you know, because they're good jazz musicians, and, you know, and they'll just go off with it in those directions. But there's other poems which I didn't prepare or have ready to do from memory here. But there's a poem where my father died, and I'm just going to say this one. And I should send you my CD if I don't have that. But it's just it's a poem where when he died, I was sort of with him, you know, close to his last moments. Then while I was asleep, he died that night. You know, and I'm still working on a poem about that. But when I came back from Chicago, you know, and I went to the slam, and my friend Matthew Burgess, who's on my CD, the percussionist, really fantastic. I just said, we're going to record this. And we just had a little recorder, and it was a breathing thing. And, you know, if you ever listen to anyone in hospice who is in their last moments, you know, the breathing changes and they give you instructions of what it's going to be like. And so I kind of did it from memory. And it's a performance poem. It won't work on the page, you know, and it's just this breathing in his delirium, and my mother talking to him and coming in and out, you know, that kind of thing. So sometimes poems, you know, I've got a few that are just performance poems, you know, or I have this one that has a chant in the middle of it in memory of Jeremiah Buck. And that works on the page well enough, but the chant doesn't necessarily. You kind of have to, it's like listening to when people do jazz poems and they write the different jazz, you know, stuff in there. You kind of can read it and hear it, but you really want to hear them perform it, you know?
Right. Yeah,
so
for sure. Is that poem in this Vanishing, the Jeremiah Buck?
It is. Jeremiah Buck is in this Vanishing.
Yeah. And because I remember when I just having just read it again here just in the last 24 hours. I
explained illness.
I was wondering if in fact that chant was just chant language, or if it was another language.
Well, no, what it was that I was just finishing up NYU in '87 when I wrote it, and Cannell, he would take us all at the end of the semester. He'd trade his services into some place, like one was upstate at some union place, you know, that was with, you know, a lake and cabins and stuff, and he did a big public reading, and, you know, and they brought in money for that, and then we got to spend the weekend there free of charge, right? And so this one was in Lenox, Massachusetts, and it was I went and found an old graveyard, you know, and so as long as I'm talking about it, maybe I'll look for it and then see if I can go from there, because I've kind of got it memorized. But and so what happened is that so I wrote that poem based on that, you know, just of the rhythm of walking for the chant. And then, of course, I was, you know, I had some Anglo-Saxon in my mind, you know, but it really, maybe kith, you know, or the idea of Om in some way, right? You know, so I'll see if I've got this. In memory of Jeremiah Buck, September 8th, 1834. Flies have tangled and buried themselves in whatever hair they can find. Eyebrow and eyelash, ear gristle and nose. Pine needles rest brown amidst the lavender and white of flower. Here, only the very old and very young. These, Olivia, wife of Ichabod Dorcas Benton, died Pittsfield, May 13th, 1832. Or John, the second son of Samuel and Olive Wright, December 30th, 1832, April 15th, 1842. And here is William Alden, the Packard's only son, gone at 10 months. Once I walked in a circle about them, fearless in some child politeness taught me by aunts in black shawls, in soul deference, not to step upon their shadows lest they cry out. Yet now I turn stubborn against myself in some effort to escape, chanting with each heavy foot. Om, 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 kif kif kela, om, kif kif kela, om, kif kif kela, om, kif kif kela, mother, father, suna, father, mother, suna, kif kif kela, kif kif kela, 3 stone, 3 stone, 3 stone, 3 stone, William, Livia, 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 don't take my child, don't take my child, take me, William, William, don't take me, take my child, William. But there's nothing left, not even memory, only this breath, which drops downward into tree root and under dirt, long past the rot and mucus, and rests with them as they bless themselves back into soil and sand and salt, back through tree root, tree trunk, each particle making its way toward leaf and bud, back toward sunlight, toward gaseous spirit, toward sun breath. Suna, mother, father, kif kif kela, kif kif kela, 3 stone, 3 stone, 3. Cool. So that, I think chants are part of, poetry. They don't always translate on a page, obviously, and, I do different things, and you've had music with this, all these other kind of things come into play, but it still works, so yeah, so.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I'm so happy that this is stuff that will be a part of this whole archive captured, because you're so obviously an oral poet. Such an extremely wonderful renderer of your poetry orally. Let's put it that way.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll read 2 more poems, and then we can interrupt in between, and that we'll call it good, so we don't overdo it.
Good.
But I'll do something perhaps maybe with a little sense of humor. Whatever passes for wit in my, because they always say that poetry isn't, poetry. Whatever that line from the poetry does the homage to Yeats at the end, that poetry does nothing or something like that, or I forget who. Yeah, if I get that poet in my ear, it's clangy. It's like I'm singing Afternoon Delight, even though his poetry is beautiful, but the rhythms get there. So, but they say poetry can't accomplish anything. Of course, poetry does what it's always done, right? So if you ever find yourself in a bar, this poem will come in useful. How to use poetry to tell someone off without getting hit in the face in return. Some say reincarnation is true, the order of all things, that the spirit undying comes back again and again and again, in learning, then unlearning, then relearning, through the full measure of the karmic wheel. Possible even that one may incarnate in 2 bodies at once and live 2 separate lives. But what are the rules? What if those paths cross? Across a crowded room, one sparkles at oneself. One becomes utterly entranced with one, until one finds oneself alone in bed together. To give new meaning, true meaning, to the term, "Go fuck yourself," again and again and again. Sometimes the mind goes in strange places.
Oh, that's good advice.
Okay. So, so anyway, I figured I'd get a little humor before I get the last somber note, right? You know?
Well, I mean, this coming up in the first part of April, we're supposed to, me and Cheryl Nothi and Robert Lee are going to just kind of do a little kickoff celebration of Poetry Month at the library in
Nice.
And with humor and poetry.
Yeah.
So we're gonna dig around and collect a bunch of witty poets who's, like you say, their wit is a little, you know, it's theirs.
Yeah, exactly.
It may be funny or not to you, but we're going to give it a go. All poetry is welcome.
I like that, you know, and because I think, you know, I mean, like, you know, Shakespeare's perfect in that because, you know, I mean, aside from the obvious, you know, comedy stuff, but he'll toss in, you know, it's in the middle of Macbeth or whatever, you know, and you've got these comedy scenes in there, you know, I mean, to break the tension, but also it adds something, you know, it releases the tension, but it also has a bit of commentary too, without, you know,
Yeah.
so I like having humor. And, you know, I had this one poem about my mom losing her eye, and, you know, a lot of it's based on some of the things we said back and forth, but she has this whole comic thing about the eye falling out and doing all sorts of things with it, you know, and so, you know, that's her sense of humor. You know?
Well, I mean, and I think that's we've had a few conversations with other people along the same lines that I mean, that humor is universal, and it is a way that we deal with the world, and you know, things like, I mean, obviously right now that's what's going on across the world is not very goddamn funny, but those people in their day-to-day existence are probably using humor to survive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you need, yeah, you know, there's lots of books that I've read about like survivors and things like that of different experiences, everything from, you know, the Holocaust and World War II, you know, to, you know, the Cambodia, you know, I mean, the litany goes on about these things. You know, we can step back into history, but humor, right? The sense to be able to find something in that, you know, as well as the sacred and the wonderful. But yeah, you know, so anyway, so yeah, exact humor, yes. Yeah.
You've got another one.
Yeah, so we'll finish this, and this is just, remember we talked about this vanishing, where it was, you know, that last poem was somewhat hopeful about the state of, you know, our environment, you know, and everything, and how we might be addressing it. But, you know, scientists are saying, well, you know, we're really kind of almost, well, we're past the tipping point. You know, don't look up. You know, type of thing.
Too late.
Yeah, you know, so you know, if some people think the Earth is a living, you know, entity in a way, right, for lack of a better term, but certainly it's our home, and it's been our home for as long as we've been a species, and so I kind of had those ideas in mind. And then there's that wonderful thing by Keats where he says, the poetry of the earth is never dead. You know, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. You know, it only increases. You know, it will never pass into nothingness. Mm-hmm. So those kind of things are in my mind when this popped up. So the title of the poem is "What Then?" And just to let you know, I'm probably going to add another verse in there somewhere towards the end, but it's good enough for now. What then, the poetry of earth? What if now this earth should lose its hold of love? The ingot at the core course through crevice and funnel, swell in caldera and steam, rough fire pour forth in tremor, in rupture beyond the pathetic sting of human atomic power, or the unholy fall of meteor. And by its own accord, tell itself it is no longer itself. The dream of desire is over. What then? The shackles of glacier and mountain, of ice cap and ocean, when tectonic growl and slide, suspend and fly, and all unseals into space. The breath of our world expunged in tendril and vapor, when salt water redowns the rivers and squanders the land, and the ions of the sun dance in witch hazel light on Mars instead. And we are debris, an emptiness and clump of planet, a song annulled in the measureless. What then, the cant of flat and hollow earthers, elected deniers of science and fact, or those who see in the fires of paradise shadows of a one-world order and lasers from the sky, while the Cassandra shriek of wisdom and foresight drains like the blood of Iphigenia in the ear of Artemis? What then, this once living starship, its golden sail of human curiosity unfurled under solar wind out into the immense reach of what could be, when all is untethered, spinning and frozen amid islands of earth, the unburied known and unknown of Antietam and Waterloo, of Stalingrad and Wounded Knee, out of the marshes of the Long March, from the depths of the Middle Passage, all of us risen as Amelia from the waters. Lipo will wander still, and Dufu depart again, and the bones of Temujin in the river that guards him, and Lorca's black song of inanimate rock and saber-toothed soil, and the anguish of bees like a femur in the grave, and twice dead coral in polyethylene swill of fishnet and wet wipe, of toothbrush and straws, voiceless as the sarcophagi of pharaohs, when our bond to the poetry of the earth is dead. When edifice and monument are forlorn hopes and redoubts of gravity, when even the volcanic grit of Roman concrete dissolves its weld of ash and lime as a luminous tobermorite drifts from Philippsite, away from harbors, away from breakwaters, away from piers of empire it once held together, as insolent matter of peat and permafrost once bound skull and tusk, pathogen and spore, carbon, methane and tusk, methane and root, only to thaw and flower in green moss and white campion, in foal's tail and blood and urine, and the horned lark and the clotted wool of rhinoceros, and milk teeth of dog wolf and heft of mastodon, and the microscopic segmented worm, almost human in its writhing head and anus as it devours and excretes out of dormancy. And should this print of words survive stellar cold, until electrons of ink no longer chain or hold or bear absorption of light, but unconjugate and drift, and so appear to human eyes now vanished, to also vanish, each word lifting and floating from the page, molecule by molecule of pigment, out into the stream of dust and time. What then, when what was meant to last at last does not, but slips instead into the infinite? What then, this poem of nothing into nothing? Cool.
Well,
Happy New Year, everybody. So, anyway, so
you're still working on that, guy.
Yeah, I'm still working on it.
Do you think you have something left to say?
Yeah, there's something that interrupting it, but it's not. I got to work. There's something that's going to happen at the end, different, but so which perhaps even more, perhaps uplifting in a moment, So, but I mean, I thought about that. I said, gosh, 20 years ago, I felt a little different. I said, like everyone else, there's these warning signs. What are we going to do? And this one is like, well, what if the earth just says, it's been nice, kids, I got somewhere else to be, So,
no kidding. I just recently, I've been trying to do a blog thing on the side, and I can't get to it. I don't have enough. I mean, I just don't have enough time. I'm a lot like you in that I've never had a regular writing practice, like a daily writing practice kind of thing. I write when I'm inspired to write, and so sometimes I go, quite a while without writing anything. Like quite a while to me is like a week or maybe maybe 2 weeks or something. That's if you don't write, if I don't write anything in that length of time, then I'm starting to get twitchy or something. I have to do something just to convince myself I can still write, I guess, or something. I don't know, but here I am having that midlife meltdown. The blog thing. Yeah. So anyway, I tried to do something here recently, and I thought what I came to my mind was the fact that this year my son has been out of school now for 20 years, and we got a late start, and so I'm like thinking, oh, you're kind of tagging yourself, and then. We graduated. My wife and I are the same age, and we graduated 50 years ago. Are we the same age? Close to?
I was born in 54.
Yeah, exactly. So 50 years it's been since you got out of high school, and
that's right. Yeah. Oh, geez.
geez. I mean, and the poem that came to the reason I brought this up was when I was listening to you read that poem, for some reason, the poem that I just used in that blog called Commencement came to mind. And it's just an old poem that I wrote at the time that my son graduated, and trying to think about that whole thing. But
well, do you have it? Could you read it?
Well, it's in
the weeds.
And I don't know why. Well, I guess I do know why, I suppose. It's just maybe the tone probably had something to do with it. Okay, so now you finally talked me into reading a poem back to you. Thanks for
I wanted you to read
for prompting this memory, and I'll share this after a great reading of a lot of wonderful poems. This is titled Commencement. Nothing prepares you for the tracks in the snow that turn to muddy memory. A green hunter when you were young, when everything mattered, when there was a clear motive, a reason, and a name, something you could explain, the blame you needed so you could kill what needed killing and what didn't need it back then. So much was so wrong with everything. Holocaust survivors committed suicide in Safeway parking lots. Grizzly bears got radio collars, narked on themselves. Who didn't huff, puff, snort, and grind teeth under chemical clouds? There was blood in the streets, on the castle stairs. It wasn't a dream. The world went crooked, and Big Brother played guitar. You knew it all, and how and why. Their failed mythology paraded decrepitly beneath the machine you measured, discarded, and ignored. Chaos never cared, still doesn't. Do you? You've been under the influence all of your life. Hell of a trip, knowing less the further you go and being okay with that. Ready for the end. The tunnel of light or dark, regardless. Ready for sleep, ready for quiet. No more dogma, voiceless. You can finally begin.
I love, and I love how the humor goes in and out, but you're just still on point. You're not just cracking a joke, yeah. Yeah.
It's
yeah.
Well, anyway, we will begin again tomorrow morning, and life will go on, hopefully, if we're lucky, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's true. Yeah. I'm not going to do it now, but I had a little tiny poem called Mice on that very same theme, but you look it up in Fever Dreams. You can find it's been published in that.
All right.
Anyway, thank you for this, and I love that you're going out and getting all the poets that in Montana and archiving it.
I don't see any reason why this is going to stop over the next 2 years. So if I need to, I'll call on you for more poets. if I run out of poets, which I can hardly believe that I could, because everybody knows more people. They go, oh yeah. So we'll try to get everybody.
Yeah.
But I figured, a good way to start out, which may not be a great selling point, if you're just going to do a bunch of old farts, but I figured the best place to get was all these old guys and whatever.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that they don't disappear, which was kind of the motive for the whole thing to begin with. We're all disappearing rapidly, and let's get a record.
Yeah. Well, that's why I thought of your two poems, I'll go back again, the ending one, humility, but then the other one was condolences. It's short. Yeah. So thank you very much. And I'm really happy. I'm looking forward to seeing, because there's so many poets that you've got that I don't know, and I thought I knew a good percentage of the poets in Montana now, but there's some new people that I haven't seen before. So
there will be more. And so far, there's only 6 of them are up, but I think there's probably at least a dozen or more in the can. So that they'll just keep coming, and I'll just keep trying to reach out and add to it. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. And it'll be nice to have this available, once it's, as in progress for schools, and so I've been sort of forwarding some of these things to some teachers that I've worked with. So hopefully it'll get used.
So, I mean, that's kind of what I'm hoping, is we'll be able to find a way to make that a resource and directable, maybe through the Arts Council and through Humanities Montana and everybody else that can. I'm going to just keep throwing crap up on Facebook like I always have, because I don't know what else to do. So we'll just keep going.
Yeah. And congratulations, man. I'm glad you're the Montana Poet Laureate.
Well, thanks, man. It's I'll do what I can for the next 2 years, and somebody else will take over, and we'll keep her up.
Yeah.
All right.
Wait, well, I'm going to sign off then. And,
take care.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.